Jonathan Jones, who is the Senior Manager of Corporate Training and Productivity Improvement at Mitsubishi, is really one of the best case studies. And he is so gracious with his time. And Jonathan, I appreciate you joining us. Good to see you. Denise is also here with us. But let's get started with why. Why did you start? Why did Mitsubishi start with TechCred? What was a lot of the driving purpose behind it?
Yeah, thanks, Dustin. Sorry for the audio issues to start, and thanks for having me today. I think the why was quite simple for us, and I'm a little bit embarrassed to even say it, but it may exist at other companies. Is we had significant organization, and we didn't have a budget to cover those needs. So luckily, I have a member of our group that's very active in local, state, and federal grant programs. And so he came about this, I think 2019, maybe. I can't remember the exact timing. But the real reason is we had needs to develop our associates, to upskill them, to reskill them, and we didn't have the budget to do it, especially on the technical side of the business. And so that was really the point where when that tech cred became available, we jumped on it right from the get-go, at least from when we first knew about it. But that was our main reason, is because we just didn't have the funds to support the needs for training in the organization.
How did you identify those needs? Like when you say we didn't have the budget, well, obviously you knew what you needed, you knew what people you had. How like what did you guys do as a team to understand what was needed, and even to know that you didn't have the budget? What kind of
So I think
conversations were there?
so I think there's always been, being in manufacturing, there's always a technical need. There wasn't really a requirement for us to go out and do a needs assessment on the technical side. When I say technical, I mean our engineers, our technicians. Our equipment is always evolving. We always have to keep up with the latest technology. So that has always been there, but we've always struggled with outside support and outside vendors because it is expensive to go outside for technical experience. But we had actually never done a needs assessment for our manufacturing group or our admin group. And what we found out was there was a technical need there. I mean, as simple as Microsoft Office, the applications that our entire business runs off of, and I think a lot of other companies are the same way. Most of our processes are connected to some Office 365 application, and we weren't providing anything to our associates. And so when we did that needs assessment and we stacked up all the requirements and all the cost, it was a pretty large amount. And when you go to accounting with that number, you're going to turn around without getting approval for that number. And so that led us to go, well, how can we still make this work? And coinciding with that is when the other John that works for me, through his channels, found out about the TechCred grant. So we had a needs assessment. We evaluated what it would cost to do that, and we had to find other means to deliver that to our organization.
It's really interesting, and I don't think I've ever asked this question, so I'll surprise you with one. As a company, as an organization, how does that make Mitsubishi feel about their relationship with the state when you see this gap and the state has this program to help fill that gap? Because companies are moving all the time. How does that make you feel about your relationship with the state?
That the state actually cares. And you hear about a lot of this, whether it's in the political scene or not, but this, especially the state of Ohio, is out to help, and there's resources available. So I think one of the first activities I supported 2 or 3 years ago, I talked with somebody and I was like, please keep this going, because our organization's starting to realize that the local and state government is out to help, right? There's a lot of cases where it's the other side. But in this case, in other cases, because TechCred is one grant, but we're active in other Ohio grant programs as well. So it really changed our mindset that they're actually out to help. They're actually out to help us develop our workforce. I know it's on the technical side, but we have a lot of technical needs here. So it's started to kind of switch that mindset a little bit about our relationship with the government.
And so what was the first time you guys applied? And I guess even kind of now that you've done it so many times, what's your experience been like with the application process and implementing actually getting the reimbursements and everything?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, scary at first, but I think I'll be honest with you, Dustin. Back when we did this, we didn't have you presenting the process, right? We were just kind of learning as we did. So it was scary. But once we got started, just as anything, we realized it's not as complicated as we had in our minds. And there's a lot more resources out there to support, whether it's seminars like this or it's lunch and learns or dinners or those kind of things where the state or other companies are showing the process and walking through how to do it. But we didn't necessarily have that, so we just learned on our own. And the benefit was so large, it's free money. So our perspective was with whatever time and resources you have to allocate to, do your prior slide, follow those 4 steps, get the information that's necessary, do the training, get all the information on the back end to get the reimbursement. It's worth every hour, every minute that you spend on it because we can now provide training to our organization that was not really available to us in the past.
And I think the most important question is number three here, because I like in my head as I hear, and real quick, can you share with our audience some of the numbers that you may have around your usage of the TechCred program?
So we have, I think, within the scope of TechCred, because we do have 3 locations, but TechCred is mainly for Ohio or for Ohio. We have about 500 associates that work at our location in Mason, Ohio, and we just crossed the $500,000 threshold for reimbursement. So I think we're probably at closer to $600,000 since 2019. And honestly, when we started out, I think our first year in 2019 was probably like $10,000 as we were learning, 10 or 15,000. So most of that 600,000 is in the last 3 years. And so we max out our request, every cycle, which is 6 times a year. We max it out every single time. And we've got people fighting over it, who wants, we have our IT department, our engineering department, our production departments that are now starting to kind of battle over the funds. But yeah, we max out every time and we use those funds almost, I won't say weekly, but at least once a month, we have some type of tech cred reimbursed training that we have going on at our facility. So
Well, I'm going to make sure to talk to the state that if you guys cross that $1 million mark, you need some kind of a plaque or one of those crystals you can put on a shelf or something that marks that milestone because that's amazing that you guys are really taking advantage of the program. Um, and what's with all of that investment, my biggest curiosity is I just think of all of these individuals that can go home and talk about what they've learned, maybe with their families or talk to people about the classes that they're taking. And then they're like, yeah, my company's paying for it, or it's covered, or it doesn't cost me anything. That type of investment into your workforce, what has changed within the company culture now that those investments are being made? And you're fully utilizing it to its full potential.
yeah, I mean, in simplistic terms, people are asking for training now. I mean, I think when I started here in 2017, again, I think we got active in TechCred 2019, but folks weren't even talking about it because I think over the time they had realized the company, I don't want to say it doesn't care, but wasn't making that investment in training. So now that they know it and kind of connected to your words of wisdom, you don't have to let them know it's a grant program. So they can have the perception that the company is making the investment because we are spending time. There's some administrative functions and processes that we have to do to guarantee that it gets reimbursed, but the employee doesn't necessarily see that. They see the company is making an investment in the development. And I think 2 weeks ago, our most recent example, we had a 10-person uh, Yamaha robot training that was $11,000. It was 2 days and it was free. And when the engineers and technicians walk out of that class and they now know how to install, troubleshoot, program those robots, they're leaving with a skill set that they can apply that day or within that year. And so I think it's twofold. Number one is we get more interest in training because the company is offering it. And the second is, like you said, people can walk home knowing that I learned something today that's going to help me in my job that I didn't know yesterday. So the company is making that investment in me personally, which leads to that pride, I guess, and the willingness to come to work every day.
And so back to those words of wisdom real quick, and thank you for sharing again. This is, I think what you're saying is more powerful than anything I'm going to go through today. But the words of wisdom you've mentioned before, and I've actually stolen your words and your advice, and so I'm going to kind of lead you on this one. Um, you mentioned having the right, and I think you mentioned just a moment ago the administrative part of it, that there are certain players and conversations that need to take place. There are certain people that need to lead this charge. There's a certain way that you found some success in how you streamline the way this works. So, in your words of wisdom, can you give some advice on, for the first time, people that are applying for TechCred on how to put the right people in place to be successful in this process?
Yeah, my words of wisdom may be a little bit tough here, but I think if you can find somebody in your organization that can predict the value and has a sense of pride in what you're going to be able to offer, that's going to be somebody that's going to allow somebody to work through the issues and get started. Because John, who's in the group that covers this for us, he raised his hand. Well, once we started talking about it, he's like, I'll do this because I see the benefit of to the organization. I see the value to the organization of doing this. So I do think you need to have a point person that's responsible for the process beginning to end. And I mean setting up all the documentation for TechCred, doing all the communications for open periods, closing periods, due dates for submissions, doing the submissions to the website, getting the results back once they're approved or denied. Don't have many that are denied, but it does happen. Doing that communication and then getting the documentation on the back end to make sure that you can properly submit and get reimbursed for that. It is, I think, ultimately necessary to have one singular point of contact that has a desire and an interest in doing it. Is very, very important, and have that person engage with the leadership of the facility in whatever hierarchy that you're in, whether it's the plant manager or the individual managers of the department, to engage them and to explain the process and explain the benefits to the company. It's good to have that singular point of contact. And then I say this as well, go to accounting and make a friend in accounting, whether it's the CFO or it's the senior manager of accounting or whoever it is. Have that person find somebody in accounting and start figuring out where the costs are going to go, where the reimbursement's going to go, what is the process going to look like, because it's one thing to say, let's let the individual departments pay for to get reimbursed. But on the accounting side, that is a challenge. So we got with accounting and we picked an accounting code, and all the costs go to that accounting code, and all the reimbursement goes to that accounting code. And it makes it much, much easier to track the ins and the outs. And we didn't realize that at first. We probably went a year without doing that. And then we realized, well, the accounting piece of this is important just to make sure we can track how much are we actually, when I talk about $600,000, the reason why I can give that number is because we have one account that we're using where all the costs goes into and then all the reimbursement goes into, so we can see the total benefit, but we can also track if something goes wrong, right? If there's a negative in that account, we know that we missed a reimbursement or we need something missed in the paperwork, and we can easily resolve that. But yeah, one singular point of contact that controls the beginning to end and understands the process in detail. And it's going to take some time. They're going to have some, a couple of hours here and there to do that, or upfront, maybe 10 or 15 hours to learn about the process. But once you get in the swing of it, it's maybe 1 or 2 hours a month that you have to spend on the process.
I'm going to invite any of our guests that have joined us today. This has been amazing information, Jonathan. And again, thank you for joining us. If anybody has a question for Jonathan, you can either pop it into the chat or you can unmute and decide to ask it yourself. I'll give us just a few moments, but Jonathan, you've had a major impact with what you just said on me and the way that I talk to companies about TechCred, because that administrative part of it, the accounting or HR or having a lead person, I don't think that that was a conversation I was as focused on until I heard from you and its value. And so that's made an impact on me. And so, again, if anybody has any questions for Jonathan, now's a great time to ask those. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us. If you want to stay on for a little bit, I'll let you know if there are any questions come in. If you need to jump off, I, again, totally appreciate your time. You've been an excellent advocate for the program and a friend to Max for giving us your time. So thank you very much.